Welcome back to the Robots vs. Vampires podcast. I'm Adrian Smith, your guy through all the sci-fi and fantasy.
And I'm Juliet Jones.
Ready for another deep dive.
Always, always. I love a good mix of futuristic tech and the supernatural.
Well, let's head to medieval Scotland for this one.
Ooh, okay.
Picture it. Rugged Highlands, clans slashing over ancient grudges.
Right.
And right in the middle of it all, a vampire warrior named Lachlan.
Wait a minute, a vampire warrior? That's definitely not your typical bloodsucker hiding in a coffin.
No.
This is already sounding like it's going to flip all those classic tropes on their heads.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Lachlan's not just any vampire either. He's a sight.
Ah.
Those beings from Celtic folklore?
Wow.
Super connected to the land and its magic.
Right.
He's been guarding his clan for centuries.
Wow.
But they're so caught up in their own little squabbles, they can't see the real danger coming.
So you're telling me we've got a vampire who's more worried about protecting humans than preying on them. That's a pretty big twist.
It is.
Makes you wonder what kind of threat could be so big that even a centuries-old vampire is scared,
That's where things get really interesting.
Oh, boy.
The story describes these monstrous creatures kind of wraith-like with skin that shimmers with this unnatural light.
Mm.
They're incredibly fast, incredibly deadly, just tear through Lachlan's clansmen like it's nothing.
Wraith-like beings, unnatural light. Okay, my sci-fi senses are tingling.
Yeah.
Descriptions like that always make me wonder if we're dealing with something more than just mythical beasts,
Okay.
Could we be looking at robots in disguise?
Oh.
Maybe some kind of advanced tech pretending to be supernatural?
Well, now you're thinking like a true robots versus vampires fan.
Uh-huh.
The story keeps things pretty vague, but it does mention the creature's movements being incredibly precise.
Yeah.
Their claws like shards of obsidian. It definitely leaves room for that kind of interpretation, doesn't it?
It totally does. I'm really loving how this story mixes those lines between fantasy and sci-fi. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about these classic tropes.
Right.
But wait, didn't you say Lachlan finds something even more disturbing?
Oh, yeah. It gets way creepier.
Right.
While battling these creatures, Lachlan stumbles upon this pulsing circle of energy. Totally unnatural. And there's a figure at its center chanting in this language that seems to vibrate in his very skull.
Whoa.
Later on, we find out this figure is a Wraith Lord, but not just any Wraith Lord. This one is attracted to spilled side blood.
Interesting.
And the circle. It's not just killing, it's actually like desecrating the land itself, twisting its ancient power.
Okay, so we've got a ritualistic circle chanting unnatural energy. This sounds like more than just some random monster attack.
Right.
There's a very deliberate, almost scientific method to it.
And it's
Like someone or something is trying to use the land's magic for their own gain.
That's a great point. And for Lachlan, it's personal. He can feel the land crying out the pain of this violation, resonating with his side blood.
It's like he's not just a warrior anymore. He's become the land's defender, its champion against this invasion, I guess you could call it.
That's fascinating. A vampire drawing power from the land?
Right.
It makes me wonder what kind of energy sources could fuel a being like Lachlan.
Yeah.
Could we even understand it scientifically? Is it some undiscovered bioenergy or pure magic?
Great question. The story describes it as the land's fury flowing through him, turning him into almost a force of nature himself.
It's a beautiful concept, this idea of a vampire being fueled by the very essence of the land. It's almost like those sci-fi stories where civilizations harness the power of their planets. But with a magical twist, it makes you think about the potential for sustainable energy, that balance between harnessing power and respecting the natural world.
Does, doesn't it? It's like this story is asking us to look at these ancient myths and legends through a modern lens.
Yeah.
To see the connections between the fantastical and the scientific. But enough with the theory, we've got a battle to get back to.
This Wraith Lord is no pushover, and Lachlan's facing it down with the very spirit of the Highlands at his back. Stay with us. Things are about to get epic.
Oh, I can't wait. Okay, so before we got sidetracked talking about energy sources, you were describing this epic showdown between Lachlan and the Wraith Lord.
Right.
The fate of the Highlands, maybe even more, is hanging in the balance.
Yeah.
What happens next?
Well, as you can imagine, the battle is intense. The story describes the Wraith Lord wielding shadows like whips.
Oh, wow.
Its voice filled with this chilling, mind-bending horror.
That sends shivers down my spine.
Yeah, it's like facing a nightmare made flesh.
But Lachlan, he's not backing down, is he?
Not a chance.
Yeah.
He's drawing on that land's fury, turning it into a shield against the Wraith Lord's attacks.
Hmm?
It's like watching a force of nature clash with a creature of pure darkness, almost poetic in a terrifying kind of way.
Yeah, it really shows that deep connection between Lachlan and the land, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just a power source for him, it's like they're fighting as one. It makes you think about those indigenous cultures that see themselves as part of nature, not separate from it.
Right.
Fascinating.
And that connection becomes even more crucial as the battle reaches its climax. Lachlan gathers every ounce of his strength, every echo of defiance from the land, and focuses it all into his blade.
It's like he's channeling the spirit of the Highlands, focusing centuries of resistance into one final devastating blow.
That's a powerful way to put it. And the result is incredible. When Lachlan strikes, it's not just the force of a warrior, but the wrath of the land itself unleashed.
Wow, so what happens to the Wraith Lord? Does it just vanish?
The story describes it shrieking in agony as its form dissolves into wisps of darkness.
Whoa.
The unnatural circle collapses its late extinguished heart. Silence descends on the glen, leaving Lachlan standing amidst the carnage surrounded by the bodies of his clan.
A bittersweet victory, to say the least. He saved the land, but at a terrible cost.
Exactly. Dawn breaks, painting the glen in hues of crimson and gold, a haunting reminder of the bloodshed. The few survivors who emerge look to Lachlan for answers, for guidance. They've lost everything, their homes, their families, their whole world has been shattered.
It's like those post-apocalyptic stories we talked about earlier. The immediate threat is gone, but the real struggle for survival is just beginning.
Right.
How do you rebuild, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually after such a devastating loss?
That's the challenge Lachlan faces now. He's not just a warrior anymore. He's become a leader, a symbol of hope in a world shrouded in darkness and despair. He has to find a way to guide his people through this, to help them heal and find a way to move forward.
And what about the larger threat? We know this Wraith Lord was just a herald. Whatever force sent it is still out there lurking in the shadows. What can Lachlan do to prepare for that?
Right.
Could he somehow use his connection to the land, maybe even merge it with technology to create a new kind of defense?
Those are the questions that linger long after the story ends. And that's the brilliance of it. It doesn't give us easy answers. It challenges us to think about the possibilities, the ways in which magic technology and human resilience might intersect in the face of unimaginable threats. And you know what? I think that's a pretty good metaphor for our own world, don't you think? We're facing our own set of challenges. Climate change, social unrest, technological disruption.
Yeah.
We need to find ways to tap into our own inner strength, our own connection to the world around us, to navigate these uncharted waters.
Absolutely. This story, with its blend of ancient myths and futuristic possibilities, reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there's always potential for change, for adaptation, for hope.
Well said. And that's a perfect segue to our final thoughts. We'll be back to unpack some of those bigger themes and explore what this story might tell us about our own relationship with technology, the environment, and the enduring power of myth. Welcome back to the Robots vs. Vampires podcast.
You know, one thing that keeps bugging me about Lachlan's story is those wraith creatures. Right.
With their unnatural glow and those super precise movements, they almost felt robotic, didn't they?
They really did. And you know me, I always love connecting the dots between fantasy and sci-fi.
Right.
That's what we're all about here.
It is. It is.
So let's speculate a bit.
Okay.
What if those creatures weren't born of magic, but built?
Yeah.
What if there's some kind of advanced tech that we can't even imagine yet?
Okay, now you're talking.
Uh-huh.
It's like someone took the idea of a golem, you know, that mythical creature made of clay,
Yeah.
and gave it a futuristic upgrade.
Right.
Like robots designed to look like mythical beasts sent to conquer.
Exactly. And think about it. If we're dealing with robots, that means there's someone or something behind them, controlling them, building them.
Right.
Are we talking about a hidden civilization? Aliens? A rogue AI?
Whoa.
The possibilities are crazy.
It's making my head spin.
Yeah.
And what about Lachlan? He's got this incredible connection to the land, that ancient magic flowing through him. Could he use that to fight back against this tech threat?
Yeah.
Maybe even turn their own weapons against them.
Now that's an interesting thought. Imagine Lachlan merging his ancient magic with futuristic tech.
Yeah.
It's like fantasy meets cyberpunk, a world where swords clash with laser beams, where spells are coded into circuits.
Wow.
It makes you wonder, could we see that kind of fusion in our own future?
You know, it's not as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah.
We're already seeing tech blurring the lines with things we used to think were magic.
Right.
AI, gene editing, nanotech, it's all pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
You're so right. And this story, even though it's set in medieval Scotland, it feels so relevant to our world today.
Yeah.
It makes us think about the role of technology in our lives,
Uh-huh.
the potential dangers, but also the incredible possibilities.
Like Lachlan's journey is a metaphor for our own terms. We're always facing new challenges, new threats, new unknowns.
Right.
And sometimes we have to tap into our own inner strength, our own ingenuity to find a way forward.
And maybe, just maybe, the key to survival is finding that balance, a way to merge the old with the new, the magic with the machine. Who knows? Maybe Lachlan's story can teach us something about navigating our own uncertain future.
I think you've nailed it. This episode has been wild, full of twists and turns, thought-provoking ideas, and a good dose of what-ifs.
It has been fun.
And that's what the Robots vs. Vampires podcast is all about. Exploring those intersections between fantasy and sci-fi, the ancient and the modern, and seeing what happens when those worlds collide.
Well said. And for our listeners out there, keep those imaginations running wild. Look for those moments in your own lives where the impossible seems possible.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe you'll find a little bit of magic hiding in the circuits of our everyday lives.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Robots vs. Vampires podcast. Thanks for joining us on this epic adventure. We'll see you next time for another thrilling tale where science fiction and fantasy collide. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop believing in the power of a good story.